भारत कीर्ति सीरीज।
नमस्कार। हिरण्यवर्णां हरिणीं सुवर्णरजतस्रजां चन्द्रां हिरण्मयीं लक्ष्मीं जातवेदो म आवह ताम आवह जातवेदो लक्ष्मीमनपगामिनीं यस्यां हिरण्यं विन्देयं गामश्वं पुरुषानहम् अश्वपूर्वां रथमध्यां हस्तिनाद प्रबोधिनीं श्रियं देवीम् उपह्वये श्रीमादेवी जुषताम्। These are the first few lines of the Shri Suktam from the Rig Veda. And why do I recite it for you today? Because today I am going to speak of women in the Mauryan period. And this Shri Suktam is the first literary and conceptual idea of femininity and women that we get in our own tradition. Everything is in the power of Devi. And if this is the idea of women in the Indic tradition, in this civilization, what can you expect from the real women that we will be talking of today? Although we also conceptualize our entire land as the body of the goddess Sati, it is not of goddesses that I will speak today. It is of real women. Remember that this is because we are considering the Janpad, the third element of the seven-armed state, the Saptang state, and this is the land and the people. We have already studied Swami, the king, and Amatya or administration. So now, let's remember episode 1. We had spoken of using Indic and indigenous epistemological categories to study our own stories, to study our own history. How will we study women therefore? Not using Marxist categories, not using feminist categories. Marxism and Marxist feminism are part of what are called conflict theories. These conflict theories presuppose a clash between different power groups in society. In India, in the Indic way of thinking, all these are resolved harmoniously. Therefore, using conflict theory does not really suit our own indigenous genius. So what will we be using? We will be using the Varnashram Dharma framework and the 4 Purusharth. What is Varnashram Dharma? You know about Varn, that is the division of society into different professions, occupations and castes. This is a much misunderstood subject which I will be dealing with later. But for the moment, just think of it as a kind of professional and occupational division. And ashram, we are well aware of the 4 ashrams which start with brahmacharya, go on to grihast, vanprasth and then sannyas. It is also true that these 4 are 4 choices that can be made at the cusp of life, so to speak. When a student finishes their study period and comes out from the Gurukul, these are the 4 choices that they have. They can remain in the field of education, they can become grihas, they can withdraw from the world, or they can become complete ascetics. Some of our earlier lawgivers and rishis such as Rishi Gautam have understood ashram as choice, and that is how I am going to understand it. So what choices did women have in terms of the ashram that they had to follow? We will also think of the sources of power and prestige in this ancient society that we are studying. What were they? That is of course there's always physical power, military prowess, there's always economics and riches. In India, it was also education, it was also knowledge and the power to conduct certain important rituals. Children have always been in ancient societies sources of power. So this is the kind of framework, these are the elements that will fit together when we consider the issue of women. So let us think about it. What were what was the situation as far as, say, the first thing, military prowess or physical strength is concerned? In days of yore, in the Gurukuls, where both girls and boys went for education, yes, indeed they did. You may be surprised by this. It was a part of their comprehensive education. Physical education was part of what they learned. Also, the princesses and royal women received extensive military training. The next is, say, education. Were they allowed to be educated? Yes, indeed, they were. And some of them even became Brahmavadinis. That is, they stayed in the field of education and they became teachers. What about Vanprasth and Sannyas? Yes, there were also some women who decided to become wandering ascetics and withdrew from the world completely. As far as economics is concerned, women contributed to economics because everything was in the home, remember. And whether it be agricultural labor or whether it be cotton weaving, as we have seen in the past episodes, or whether it be even making of small weapons at home, all these things were done by women in the economic sphere. Two important things to note here. Of the 4 ashrams, Grihasthashram was the most important. In fact, some of our lawgivers have even called the whole system Ekashramya, which means that it was only Grihasthashram which was important. Because it was the one which created all the economic surplus, it was the one because of which society got new members, as in children were born, and all the surplus that was created in society was because of the Grihasts. And the Grihapatni was a very, very important figure inside this Grihasti and therefore for the economy as a whole. This Grihapatni was also the person, the arbiter of the economic resources inside a Grihasti. What was to be spent where, what was to be given to whom, how the resources were to be used were also in her purview. So remember, we are in a kind of pre-Betty Friedan phase. The feminine mystique has not yet succeeded in completely annihilating the value of domesticity. Today we abhor domesticity. We think of it as something to escape from. But that was not so. And it was important, it was valued, it was prestigious, and keeping the fire of Grihasti running was part of the whole ritual system according to which society operated. Women were also allowed to conduct rituals and they were also mantravids, as we know. But the important thing was to keep the fire of the Grihasti running. Now, before I go on to the specifics of the Mauryan period, there's an important thing that I must speak about, and that is choice. That is sexual choice, sexual freedom. To what extent was it available to women? I shall be talking about marriage in yet another episode after this one. But I will give you a general background of the way sexual activity was thought of and was envisaged by both men and women. So from today's standards, Mauryan women we would think of as very liberated, because they had not only did they have these choices, they exercised them without any guilt. So this whole idea of guilt and negativity connected with sexual activity was not there. Shringar Ras, that was the, what can I say, the color of sexual activity in the ancient past and in the Mauryan period. The aesthetics of sex was Shringar. It was not, Bibhats Ras or negativity as it is now. Now I will go on to some of the very specific things in the Mauryan period that we know from all kinds of evidence, especially the Arthashastra. In the sphere of politics, the queen and the queen mother were part of the inner council of the king and were also the most highly paid public officials in the kingdom. They had a role to play in the decisions taken by the king. Then what about others? For instance, take spies. Now these spies were very important political cogs. Chanakya ran an efficient and huge spy system across the kingdom, and women were the most important constituents of this. There were two kinds of spy systems, Sanstha and Sanchara. Sanstha was the establishment which did not move, and Sanchara were those who moved around and gathered intelligence. In the Sanstha organization, there were Bhikshunis who were part of the establishment headquarters, so to speak. And as far as Sanchara were concerned, so there were Bhikshunis, there were Parivrajikas, there were Brahmin widows, then there were artists, theatre artists who of course moved around the entire country and found it easy to gather intelligence. There were also women who assumed all kinds of disguises and entered households to keep important households to keep an eye on them. There were also orphans who were brought up fully and completely as spies and taught all the things necessary for a spy to know. And there were some very specific shastras that they had to know. Interestingly enough, the artists, the musicians and the singers, they gave each other messages, secret messages, through recitations, through music, through singing, and even through hiding little bits of their messages inside their musical instruments. Now to the special role of Ganikas. Ganikas were courtesans deluxe, not prostitutes who we look down on today and who eke out a very poor and miserly and sad existence. No. They were the most talented and skilled women who were trained in the 64 arts, who were very important and prestigious members of society, and they also acted as spies both within the kingdom and sometimes outside the kingdom, in which case they kind of doubled up as diplomats, and sometimes they were also double agents. Please read my book Urnabhi, where the protagonist is nothing but a Ganika, a spy in the pay of the master Chanakya. Now for that very interesting thing, the bodyguards of Chandragupta Maurya. You have seen in episode 3 that the Antarvanshika, or the chief of the king's guards, was always a woman. She also headed a division of female soldiers. So the most important people who guarded the precious person of the king and who in fact controlled access to him were women, and therefore the Antarvanshika was one of the most powerful officials in the Mauryan kingdom, and of course she was a woman. I will end now with a general description of the social situation regarding women. What was the situation regarding marriage, remarriage, divorce, property, inheritance, criminal laws, etc. So property was inherited by women and could also be given by them to their children under certain circumstances, including their daughters. Remarriage was possible, and divorce by mutual consent was also possible. Yes. There were many criminal laws. There are whole sections on this, not only in the Arthashastra but in other Shastras. And an important thing which we engage with today, called consent of the woman as far as sexual violence is concerned, is very much present in the Arthashastra. So this is a kind of modern reading of a very ancient text. We talk about consent and think that this is something new we have come up with, but it's not. Of course, it was not, we could not agree with everything that the Arthashastra says, because in one of the chapters on criminal activity, it is said that you cannot abuse your wife, but you can slap her 3 times. Now, this is not something any of us can be comfortable with. Importantly, there were strict penalties against maltreatment of servants and maltreatment of prostitutes. So that shows you at a very micro level how the welfare of women was always thought of. And I have been mentioning widows all this time. So there was a category of rich widows who used to enjoy life and about whom a lot has been written in the Arthashastra. So it just makes you think that it was not as if the death of her husband made a woman completely destitute or derelict or forced to become a sati. It was not like that at all. I have now presented a nuanced picture of women from the past and from the Mauryan period to you. It was not a paradise, nor was it the kind of backward and regressive hell that we think it is. In actual fact, I think that there are certain tenets and certain ideas that we can pick up from the past. Very, very importantly, ideas about the sexual activity of women and attitudes towards sex, and also attitudes towards domesticity. The devaluation of domesticity that is happening in the present period is not, according to me, conducive to the health of either individuals or of society. I am writing a book on this which should come out next year. It's called The Modern Women of Ancient India. Do read it when it comes out. And till then, keep on going with me as I go on in this journey. Now, I am off to watch a film. This should give you a hint about what I'm going to speak of in the next episode. Namaskar.
And now, on to the next episode. Here all of us are tied down and confined due to the pandemic. Don't we wish we could travel, entertain ourselves as we used to? How did the Mauryans do it? What were their public spaces like? Did they travel? Did they entertain themselves? Stay with me as I explore the wonderful world of Mauryan travel and entertainment.